Well, hello there. I'm old host Eric. Welcome to Talking with Fanfill. Hey, Lordy, Lordy. It's a beautiful morning here on Talking with Fanfill. I tell you, I do. Anyhow, all that notwithstanding, the question today is, does C.S. Joseph know he's not an ENTP? And here's my surprising answer today. No. He actually probably does think he's an ENTP. If he is, in fact, an ESTJ, which is probable, he could be ESFP is the other possibility. But I think he's more of an ESTJ. And if he is an ESTJ and he's NI-polar, then he probably doesn't even have any idea that true answers exist, you know? It's like, C.S. Joseph, the title of this video is, does C.S. Joseph know he's not an ENTP? No, I don't think he does. Because he's got NI-polar, to him, his only his experiential knowledge matters. If he wants to experience himself as an ENTP, then he is, as far as he's concerned, you know? It's like, that's why people need introverted intuition in their life. Good morning, grooming zone. Did I tell him? Yes, I have told him before that he's not an ENTP. Of course, he really shouldn't need me to tell him that, because all any sane person has to do is look at me a little bit, recognize that I definitely am an ENTP, that I match up on every point across the board, on every understanding of the term. I'm definitely an ENTP. And any sane person looking at me and being C.S. Joseph would say, okay, well, I'm not that. But if you're NI-polar, and it says this is sort of a holistic truth, you know, it's like, what type you are is a holistic truth. We're working on getting it deductively reducible, or, you know, determined in a more determinate way. But we're not there yet. So as a consequence, your type is ultimately like, you have to factor in a lot of different factors and come to the correct NI conclusion. If he is, in fact, ESTJ, then his total lack of introverted intuition would explain why he's so doggedly unwilling to consider truth, you know? His truth is his experience, and that's it. So I guess the core message of this is, it's exceedingly okay, Zaylen Black, look, only people who are in stark opposition to me, spite monkeys, have any doubt on my type, or possibly incredibly ill-informed people. If I'm not an ENTP, what does an ENTP look like? My SI is too good? Are you kidding me? You got to be kidding me. My SI is too good. It's like last night I got about 9 hours of sleep, something like that. The night before I got 0. The night before that I got 1 hour of sleep. Talk about crazy. My SI is too good, and I feel too strongly. Okay. Then what would it look like if I were an ENTP? How would I be different? I mean, yeah, if you want to type people on vibes, then you're still wrong. I mean, I don't give off the vibe of anything but an ENTP if you know anything about ENTPs or ENFPs or ISFJs or whatever. The funny thing is nobody accuses me of being an ENFP. That's the funny thing. Because you can't possibly sustain any argument that I'm an ISFJ or an ESFJ. It makes absolutely no sense. If I'm an ISFJ or an ESFJ, then what does good TI look like? You're welcome, Kenton Davy. My pleasure. I mean, the thing is, Oliver Powell? I don't think so. Yeah, so there really genuinely isn't any honest dispute about my type. No honest people are doubting my type because of the simple fact that to say that I am not an ENTP, to say that I am, say, an ISFJ, an ESFJ, then you have to answer the basic question, what would I look like if I didn't have fourth slot TI or third slot TI, if I had second slot TI? What would I look like if I didn't have fourth or third slot extroverted intuition, if it was dominant? If this isn't dominant, what then? It's like you can't find a single other person in the world who's more textbook ENTP than me. You cannot find a single other person in the world who displays a more obvious litany of extroverted intuition and introverted thinking. And yeah, I'm not that damaged. I'm remarkably undamaged, which is why I'm so free with my emotions. I don't feel vulnerable about being emotional. That partially has to do with FI polar too. When I'm forced to engage in FI for too long, it can be very, very uncomfortable, such as watching that movie. Even though it was a 10, it was a brilliant movie, it was extremely uncomfortable for me to watch because it was asking me to process so much FI data. But I do think this is kind of an important question as to whether CS Joseph actually knows he's not an EHP and is just lying to everybody, or if he really genuinely is incapable of knowing that. And if he is an ESTJ and he's good job for Oliver then. Thank you for letting me know that, Ursel. Why would the INFJs not? Well, I mean, they're probably not INFJs in the INFJ subreddit. That's why. Okay, well, so I'm Ryan Barron. My initial guess on CS Joseph was also ENTJ. If CS Joseph is an ENTJ, then he is openly lying to everybody. Because if he's an ENTJ, at this point, he does know he's not an ENTP. And he's willfully and intentionally lying. What included me? That I lie on social media? No, I don't. I mean, I'm not entirely lie free. I have told some lies in my life, sure. I can probably relatively well articulate the last lie I can remember telling. It was to my dad. It was months ago. I'm not a liar. The reason I'm not a liar is not because I'm such a wonderful person or anything, but because I'm NETI, I expect to be subject to critique on inconsistencies. And I have, as a consequence, become increasingly rigorously honest as I've gotten older. I can't bust other people's chops for inconsistencies if I display them myself. So it's absolutely not the case that I lie on social media. Grooming zone. It is absolutely the case that given your statement, quote, everybody lies on social media to portray their best self, that I believe you definitely do. You've revealed that to me clearly. You lie on social media to make yourself look better. I don't. I'm not interested in doing that. Email anthrax. C.S. Joseph is not FI polar. He's no ESTP. If you were look, one of the big advantages of being FI polar is that you aren't attached to your positions. You're able to choose what's correct instead. He's not able to do that. Look, Grimmington, I didn't say I don't lie. I mentioned that there are occasional lies. I'm not entirely lie free, but my claim that by and large I don't lie on social media is entirely true. Because here's why. I'm making public statements. They're subject to the scrutiny and response of other people. So I have to be very careful about what I say. I would hate to be caught in a lie. I'd hate to be hypocritical about lying. I have a strong stance against it. So by and large, I don't lie. Okay, but email anthrax, my point is the only explanation for why he would actually believe that what he's saying is true is if his understanding of truth is entirely experiential. Like, if I think that everything I experience as true is true, then it doesn't matter what the facts are. That sounds like either NI polar or TI polar. Yeah, he has large quantities of shit SI, shit FI is correct. No, Raphael, I'm not saying somebody should completely detach emotionally. I'm not saying that when I tell the truth, when I really would rather lie, that it's not a little emotionally painful. Obviously, it's something I want to hide. I'd rather tell a lie about it, but I tell the truth anyway. I am not emotionally disconnected. I just prioritize the long-term emotional well-being over the short-term. And I know that long-term emotional well-being is sustained best by honesty. Okay, well, email anthrax says he's a social engineer. He's applying real-world experience to his system. I mean, I don't see him as a social engineer. Can you conceive of anybody intelligent being manipulated by him? I can't. Like, no intelligent person would afford him a moment's notice. No, I said, yeah, I'm saying I'm emotionally detached from my positions. Okay, so what that means is I may feel emotions, but I don't let them influence my decisions about positions, which is appropriate. You shouldn't let your emotions influence your decisions about positions. You got to remember, Raphael, there are different parts of life. So if I am talking to Rachel about how much I love her, it's important that I allow my emotion to exist and come into play. It's relevant, very relevant. But when we're talking about cognitive functions, it's entirely irrelevant and will only lead you astray. So being able to code switch for appropriate context is important. If you always apply the same modalities, no matter what the context is, you're going to be wrong plenty of times. Of course, look, but see, Raphael, again, you're ignoring me. My expression of emotion is not what's relevant here. The question is whether you allow your emotions to influence your positions. And that's what I'm saying is not. Now, I am a very expressive person, Being bipolar means that I've got a lot of emotional expressiveness in my FE in part. That's one of the things it means. But being expressive and being biased by one's emotions are different things. Why does he have so many followers? Well, because I suspect he's mastered relatively well the art of symbols of competency. So he has an authoritative tone. He has a whiteboard. He wears the attitude of expert. And for people who aren't TI users, who aren't accustomed to parsing out the truth for themselves, who aren't accustomed to saying, oh, there's a statement or a position here. In order to determine its legitimacy, I'm going to do the parsing. I'm going to say, does this make sense? Blah, 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 blah. That's what TI users do. But non-TI users defer those kind of deliberative tasks to experts. So for somebody who isn't deliberating about it themselves, they're relying on symbolic cues, like symbols of competency rather than actual indications of competency. You know, and see, that's why I think CSJ is an ESTJ, is that he doesn't understand that there is a single truth to be sought here. Like that because look, he has no reason for claiming he's an ENTP either. He doesn't have any real explanation except that's what his mentor told him. SI, SITE. The problem is, regardless of whether he knows, if he doesn't know, then he's not such a malevolent character. He's just kind of tragic, If he does know, he's quite malevolent. He's willfully spreading misinformation. Right. TI users are not convinced of their... Well, okay, look. It's sort of right. Ye Basira. TI users withhold judgment and they afford conclusiveness conditionally. So any position I have is conditional. This is my position now, conditional upon things remaining as they are. Because, of course, he just reads a bunch of sources. Okay, but it doesn't matter how many sources you read, right? Let's say I have a good reason to believe that I'm an ENTP, and I read it in a book by Linda Behrens. If asked to express the reason why I'm an ENTP, I won't mention Linda Behrens. I'll simply make the argument that she made that convinced me. After all, if I've been convinced by it, I must have internalized that argument. If I don't understand the argument, then there's no reason for me to defend it, to believe it. And if I can't articulate the argument, then I don't understand any reason why I've articulated my position. When when somebody is full of shit, when you ask them to explain their reasoning and they cite an expert, well, you have to read BB. But you read BB, and something BB said convinced you that you're an ENTP. What argument convinced you? Look, you have to read the story. You have to read. I can't explain it as well as he can. You mean you don't have a reason? That's not a reason. You just chose that arbitrarily, and when pressed upon it, you can't come up with any actual arguments. You just cite your source. But you're supposed to be the expert. If you're telling me that this book says A, B, C, then I'd like you to tell me why it says A, B, C and what it means. If you don't know, then why are you citing the source anyway? Why would he care so freaking much about MBTI when he's the type that literally has the least interest in MBTI, as you said? Actually, I said ESFJ has the least interest. ESTJ is likely to not be interested because he's not really interested in MBTI, Raphael. C.S. Joseph has no interest in cognitive functions or MBTI. He has an interest in making money. If I don't want to do the homework, no emailed anthrax. If I tell you there are good reasons why you should believe X, I should be able to articulate those reasons. If I can't, then there's no reason to agree with me that there are good reasons. There's no reason to believe that any good reason to believe X exists if I can't articulate it. I don't have any problem with BB. I've taken a lot of ideas from BB myself. I don't know what ASPD is. But I wouldn't doubt an NPD diagnosis is plausible. An NPD diagnosis is sort of consistent with his delusions that that other people aren't agents, and that he's empowered, and thusly it's okay for him to manipulate everybody or something. Here's the problem, Sean Ryan Barron. I don't stand behind any typology books. I have not read anything that I consider to be correct. I've read lots of things that have little bits of correctness in them, which I take. Well, see, that's the thing. When I read a book, like a BB book or something like that, or read something on the internet, I'm looking for what is sustainable. And I'm demolishing everything that's not as I'm reading it. So when I'm done with the book, I'm left with a couple of nuggets of robust insight that withstand scrutiny. And if asked to explain what my position is, I'll explain exactly what those insights are and why they withstand scrutiny. And I won't even mention the author because it's not relevant. It doesn't matter who makes an argument. It matters whether the argument is correct or not. Well, sure, it's possible to learn from incorrect arguments. There's lots of times where an incorrect argument will be revelatory to me a great deal about the limitations of a given type, or C.S. Joseph's wrong arguments are revelatory. They reveal to us what he's not, if nothing else. He's definitely not an ENTP. Nobody who understands anything about cognitive functions could ever dream that he might even possibly be an ENTP. He has zero creativity. His sense of humor is like the bubonic plague, in that it isn't funny and kills everybody. I mean, that's the most offensive thing about him to me, is that he is claiming to be an ENTP, but he is the least funny person in the history of the world. He's so painfully unfunny that it makes me want to throttle myself watching him. I agree that a book club is a good idea, but I don't agree that cognitive function books are a good idea. I wouldn't mind having a book club that read random like fiction books or something. I might be down for that. That'd be fun. We could talk about it. It's like if I were to do cognitive function books, in my opinion, no cognitive function thinkers are starting at the right place. And so I can't get very far without going. Now, Enneagram, I'm a big consumer of Enneagram wisdom. I don't believe myself to be particularly knowledgeable about Enneagram. So I'd be more inclined to read stuff about Enneagram. And I would say this: if there's one author that I have a lot of respect for, and he's not an MBTI author, it's an Enneagram author, it's Naranja. He's super right about Enneagram, incredibly right. And when you read like his type descriptions of like type 7s, it sounds like, OG Jung is weak. OG Jung deserves credit, okay? He was the INFJ who came up with the brilliant insight of cognitive functions, the insanely brilliant insight, and he deserves full credit for that. But it is crazy to think that he parsed it out correctly. He didn't have the TI for it. He deserves full credit, though. Yeah, I know. I'm not going to really start a book club, Evelyn. I'm just talking about the idea hypothetically. But I would, if you want a recommendation of somebody to read about personality, I would recommend and I endorse Naranha. Enneagram's weak, yeah. Enneagram's weak in the sense that it's not logically sustainable. It's a taxonomical thing rather than a mechanical thing. Can EP and TI users only gain social ground through humor? No, absolutely not. I gained most of my social ground through rightness, correctness, because my TI is above my FE. What is CSO? My position today that I'm arguing is that because he's an ESTJ with polar and I, he actually doesn't know he's not an ENTP, and that makes him tragic rather than evil. Those are the two possibilities, basically. I mean, to me, they don't sound remotely true because I'm not listening to the conclusions. I'm listening to the process by which you reach those conclusions. And I'm seeing that process is garbage. But yeah, tragic is better than evil. So I don't think his videos sound even at all true. When I listen to him talk for even a little bit, I think, okay, he's not using the right kind of thinking to address this issue. And so would you like to be the part-time host once a week, Sean Barron? You're welcome to. Would you like to do that? Hurt people is an excellent sentence. Hurt people is so true. And it's something it took me a long time to accept. And it wasn't until after Kimberly that I accepted it, really. That you can't love people well. Love doesn't cure everything. No matter how decent, correct, loving, not damaged you are, you can't fix somebody who's damaged. It's especially an SI Dom. They are made of their unjust experiences, and you can't blame them for never quite getting over it. You know, it's sad because they don't. It's like Kimberly was a good person, and yet because of the way she had been treated when she was younger, she was unable, despite her best effort, to be even a decent relationship partner. So, and it's like, at the time, I'm livid about it because it's like, I'm doing everything right. Why don't you just listen to me and let me, trust me and allow yourself to relax and be safe around me? They can't. It's not their fault, They can't because they never learned to trust when they were a little kid because they didn't have people to trust them that they could trust, You look like you have been suffering from depression before. No, I actually would say I've never really suffered from depression at all. I've gone through a couple of periods in my life where I was sad, kind of, or low. The most recent time where I guess you'd say I was something like depressed was towards the end of my last relationship with Kimberly, when just the weight of the impossibility of the whole thing, like, I still sometimes wake up saying it, like, but if you just listen to me, to the words I say, and respond to them. But that required trust, to listen to the words I say, let them sink in and consider maybe you should believe them. Maybe I'm not trying to get you. But if you were trained as a little kid that every time you extended trust, you got burned, and you're an SI dom, it's unlikely you'll ever get over that. Now, so, okay, let's talk about C.S. Joseph then. If C.S. Joseph was also raised in an environment where he really couldn't trust people, then it double explains why he's so expert focused. I can't trust people, but this book doesn't change. This book doesn't respond to me. This book says this thing, I interpret it wrong. The book doesn't disagree. People do, though. So I'm going to avoid all smart people. Some things, if I'm C.S. Joseph, some things that I know I'm never going to do. Never going to talk to Eric. Number one, never, ever, ever. Because he's too smart for me, and he's going to demonstrate very clearly that I'm not an ENTP. I'm never going to talk to anybody who comes in with hard questions. Hard questions will always be deferred to an expert or ignored. When compelled by circumstances to engage a topic I don't want to engage, I will just throw a teeny bit of effort at it and then just move right on. For example, somebody paid him $100 on his live stream one time to type me again after he'd already typed me as the ESTP. He did. He watched a couple little clips of me. He watched about 5 seconds of me talking. I said, and one of the clips, something like, don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. It's like, cheese, that's so sensory, he's an ESTP. Basically, he's saying, okay, I got to give this guy the very minimum I can possibly give him for his $100 and then move on, because I know I'm going to get, everybody's going to start burning the hell out of me about this because it's so wrong. Except I don't think he actually knows that. Okay, Miguel Hedez says if he's not ENTP, then what he is. Today, I'm hypothesizing that he's ESTJ. My original typing of him was ENTJ. But here's the thing. If he were an ENTJ, he'd be much more effective at using truth, and he just isn't. He'd also be at least somewhat possibly open to the possibility that he's not an ENTP, or at least open to hearing some of those arguments. But his strategy is this. If I don't ever look at anything unpleasant, I won't have to attend to the fact that I'm full of shit. Have you seen his explanation on going on Facebook groups to talk about the users and showing off their posts? No, I haven't seen that. Kenton Davey says he believes he was INTJ because of his hurtful past, justifies by saying he lived in NITE animus and switched to ENTP later in his life. Okay, so right off the bat, a personality type is defined as aspects of the self that remain the same for one's entire life. So, he's saying, first of all, my personality is determined by something that changes. Okay, well, then you're not talking about personality. But he doesn't care. That's a definitional problem he has. It's not a TE problem, right? So the other thing is there's zero explanation from him or anybody else as to what it would mean to switch from INTJ to ENTP. Literally, what it would mean is that you spent your entire life practicing with your right hand. And then all of a sudden, abruptly, your right hand becomes your left hand and your left hand becomes your right hand. That doesn't happen for good reason, because a personality type is an accumulated set of habits. Because as a little kid, I was always using dominant extroverted intuition, it becomes increasingly ingrained and decreasingly possible to deviate from your inherent implicit identity. He said that. Actually, he said an INFJ exposed and shamed him for thinking he was an INTJ. Understandably, he's obviously not an INTJ either, and exposed to him why he's an ENTP, and he believed it. I agree. C.S. Joseph is better at displaying symbols of competency than I am. I rely on people to actually use their brains a little bit and recognize that my ideas are better. Now, additionally, Grooming Zone, I could make this look a lot nicer by somebody putting up the green screen. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. For me, I do this for myself primarily. Like, I like to live stream. I like to talk with people. I like to respond to people's notions and stuff like that. This is entertainment for me. I'm a fairly lazy person, which means I like to do what I like to do a lot. And that's not necessarily work. Does this work? No, I'm not working right now. I'm not doing any work. I'm just chatting with everybody and having a fun time. How do you think NE uses NI? I think NE users approximate NI more than NI to NE. Well, I think the best way to understand how NE users use NI is to explain why it's ignored. So for me, I'm going to generate a lot of possible explanations, ways of stating something, understandings of things, lots of them. In order to do that, I have to ignore the right one. Let's say I hit the right one third, but I'm generating 10 explanations. I have to ignore the fact that the third one is correct in order to generate 4 through 10. However, the reason extroverted intuition is using introverted intuition is it's selecting the 10 things are all examples of introverted intuition. Only some of them are examples of better introverted intuition. They're not really examples of introverted intuition. They're examples of knowledge an introverted intuitor might receive. But instead of me receiving it like that, I generate all the possibilities I can come up with, and then I can evaluate them and determine which one is more correct, or somebody else can, Otterstuff says he's a good YouTuber. He just happens to be an incompetent typologist and an ignorant person. None of those things are mutually exclusive. I agree with you. None of those things are mutually exclusive. I don't agree with you that he's a good YouTuber, though. But that he's a successful YouTuber. I will agree with that for sure. I believe that quality and aesthetics is an absolute thing. It's an objective thing, although it's not provable. And I think that objectively, his art is bad art. He's making bad media. It's not entertaining, and in fact, it annoys the hell out of me when I watch any of it. So in my opinion, he's not a good YouTuber, but he is an incompetent typologist. He is an ignorant person, and he may, however, not be responsible for all of this. He may be genuinely unable to understand why he's not an ENTP. Right, the right one sounds like NI. So, like, here's another example of how NE users use NI. I often will talk something out thinking it's possibly a good idea, and by the time I get to the end of talking it out, I go, no. So in some sense, I'm throwing shit out without checking to see if it validates on NI first. And then after I've thrown a bunch of shit out, then I go through and kind of toss out stuff that doesn't validate on NI. Sorry, everybody. Amphetamines first thing in the morning can make you a little pukey. Just a bit of, some words of wisdom for those of you taking amphetamines early in the morning. Be aware it can make you a little pukey. Who do I think, or what do I think makes a good YouTuber? Um, the truth is, I didn't debate C.S. Joseph. I never talked to C.S. Joseph. He refuses to talk to me. He's terrified. Or at least he might not even be terrified. He might just be aware, like that it genuinely does not do him. It is a no-win situation for him to talk to me or to even address anything I'm saying. He doesn't even want to begin down that path because if he addresses one thing I'm saying, it's going to disrupt what he's saying, and he's not going to have an answer for it. Now, the other thing I would say about what makes a good YouTuber is I'm not much of a YouTube consumer. So I don't really watch much YouTube. And I don't have YouTubers that I'm regular fan of. The closest, I guess, would be I watch Frank James occasionally, mostly because Rachel wants to watch it. Like, Rachel enjoys his videos a lot, and I don't not enjoy them. So I'll watch them with her. But if it's true that he wants to make money, that would be a terrible impact for business. He loses all credibility. Right, yeah. So the thing is, the only reason I can blame C.S. Joseph for refusing to engage me on the subject is that, of course, this topic is one that we need to use introverted thinking for. And he's definitely not using it. If he's an ESTJ, he's ignoring it while concurrently being blind to the truth. I just got barged in by the community owners over a pipe fix woken from my nap. Oh. Were they, at least they weren't on a barge, were they? YouTube does seem to appeal to ENTPs. Do you agree? It certainly appeals to me. I can understand why any ENTP would find it a native place to be. It allows you to make infinite number of videos, and you don't really get hurt by videos that are unsuccessful. That's important for an ENTP. We're very trial and error, and I need to know that I can make a video, have it be boring or bad, and it not really negatively impact my channel or efforts as a whole. ENTPs are like baseball players. They need to be content with hitting 280, 300. If you hit 300, they're doing great, and that's not even 1 out of every 3. So we're not unlike, NI people are like golfers. Every stroke counts a bunch. If you're a golfer and you shank your hit 3 out of 4 times, you're not going to be a very good golfer no matter what. But if you're a baseball player and you shank your hit 3 out of 4 times, well, you're still 0-2. You still have another strike to go. And if you get a home run, those things don't matter. Is the non-engagement of ideas we are seeing in public discourse probably blind and I? Yeah, I think it's my current position on this is that his refusal to engage meaningfully about his claims is an example of ignoring TI. I'm going to ignore consistency parsing, and I am blind to holistic truth. So my experience and my TE bullshit replaces the only things that are meaningfully used in cognitive function analysis, which are TI and NI. Lawnmower says, Eric, I think I have extreme social anxiety. What functions am I lacking or too much of? All right, so regarding social anxiety, I deal with people here in this context. And it's obvious to me that in this context, Lawnmower is not consumed by social anxiety. He feels comfortable engaging socially here without any problems. I mean, do you feel social anxiety here? When you're talking to me, you and I talk all the time. And I don't ever get any sense from you that you're like shy or skittish or whatever. What I'm getting at here is this. Isn't it possible that social anxiety is really just your self's way of saying, I prefer to have my social engagements like this. Is there anything wrong with socially engaging like this? I mean, the thing is, to the extent that your social anxiety is preventing you from accomplishing things you want or do things you want in life, then it qualifies as a problem that needs to be addressed. But I'm just careful because I don't want to say something about it when the reality is possibly you've internalized some limiting narrative or some sort of ontological assault about yourself that you ought to just raise both middle fingers to everybody who's saying it. I don't know for sure, so I'm hesitant to give you an answer either way about that. Eric, I think all humans are distrustful douchebags. Does that mean that I am just that? No, because, okay, look. Raphael, if in fact you did believe that all humans are distrustful douchebags, then that would include you because you're a human, and in that set of all humans is yourself. But I don't think you're a distrustful douchebag. I think you're you're a provocateur. I don't find you distrustful at all or douchebaggery at all. I find you a worthy opponent. You come in here and you challenge everything I say, which is absolutely appropriate given the subject we're talking about. That's what C.S. Joseph didn't seem to get. It's fine for him to do his shit if you were doing it on something like tarot cards. You don't have to justify what you say about that. It's pure magical thinking. That's true, Grooming Zone. My videos lack structure. If someone clicks on my video, then I may end up talking about something that has nothing to do with MBTI. That's because I'm an ENTP, unlike C.S. Joseph. So you're right that being an ENTP puts me at a certain disadvantage over an ESTJ when it comes to concrete indications of success on YouTube. And it's possible that my approach to YouTube irritates some people because they don't know what they're going to get. But like I said, primarily, YouTube is something I do for me. I enjoy it. I like this experience. I like answering this question. I like you challenging me like that. I like that because I'm an ENTP. Who doesn't like that? C.S. Joseph. He hates that. He astroturfs everything. If you make a really good, insightful comment that suggests something he said is not true, he will delete that comment. Yeah, I do think my dad and C.S. Joseph are probably the same type. I that's my position right now, anyway. The thing is, of course, because C.S. Joseph won't let me talk to him, I can't actually type him. I have to be able to ask questions and do some back and forth to type him. But my guess is that he's an ESTJ. How would an ENTP that lived like Rapunzel locked in a tower go insane? Well, I think the ENTP, first thing that the ENTP would do is chop off their own hair, tie it, and climb down and get out of the tower. Sensible thing to do. Rachmaninoff, your FE sucks. No one can play your big chords and you don't care. Does Rachmaninoff have like eight fingers engaged on a chord or something? So Russian of him. The one interesting thing about YouTube, though, also is it's really the case that videos succeed on their own merits or fail on their own merits, independent of the channel and the other videos on the channel. So, for example, there's two ways of understanding YouTube. You can understand it as attracting and retaining subscribers and developing a community. And, in some sense, I am very consistent. You can count on me to live stream almost every day, probably call a couple times a day, and to talk about interesting ideas. You cannot rely on my live streams to stay focused on the topic that's said in the title, but that's because my understanding of what a live stream is do you think C.S. Joseph's real name is Cheese? That's possible. So it's like there is an audience out there that seeks interesting conversation about a variety of interesting topics. Now, is my conversation that interesting, or is that interesting enough topics? That's a question for everybody to decide for themselves. Is my approach a strategic approach? No, I'm not deciding to approach YouTube like this. I am stumbling into it with my whim. What I feel like doing, it turns out it's this. I do try to be more practical minded sometimes and try to be more focused on improving my status or making myself more known, or being more popular. So that's why I made that video the other day about science. It was carefully made. The videos I make that are very carefully made and that are on topic and resonate as NI complete packages without too much gobbledygook in them and stuff like that, those videos usually end up having legs, and they'll continue getting views for quite a long time and continue making a little bit of money, 5 cents here or whatever. I'm definitely not going to get rich off YouTube. My ad revenues are less than $100 a month. C.S. Joseph is a con man and he knows it. Well, that's the question. That's the issue of question today. Is he aware he's not an ENTP and therefore malevolent? In other words, willfully spreading misinformation, or is he TI ignoring, NI polar, and therefore either functionally incapable of or unwilling to genuinely address the issue? I am leaning towards that second explanation now, which makes him tragic, not evil. The other thing is, Kimberly always pointed out about C.S. Joseph that I guess you could tell by looking at him or something that he used to be very, chubby and got gastric bypass surgery, and she would attribute a lot of his ways to that. She always says, see, he's just like, because I guess apparently people get gastric bypass surgery. It's like, let's say you go through your teenage years and stuff and you're kind of fat and you receive the typically occurring negativity from people as a result of that. You start to internalize that, you have to be a certain way in order to be accepted. You have to be nicer than everybody else to be accepted because you're chubby. You have to be careful about critiquing anybody because you know that if you make them mad, they could come back at you and call you fat and stuff like that, right? And so if you're subject to a lot of that shit, your ontology is really constricted. And then you get gastric bypass surgery and you get skinny and people start treating you differently. Now, if you're an ESTJ, you're going to attribute these changes to something other than that. So you're going to say, the reason I'm so douchey about, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and blah, 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 is because I didn't do that, but can't accept that. Upton Plates 48 asked, do I think C.S. Joseph could be an ESFJ? I would say it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I don't find his FE good enough to be consistent with that. But it's not an impossible typing. At least he'd have the polar and I that would be consistent with that, and the 4-slot TI is consistent with his relationship with TI. So it's not impossible. He's not an ENFP. Look, Cheese S. Joseph, Sergei Rachmaninoff says, could also be an ENFP. Ignoring the truth, totally blind to parsing out in a consistent way. Yes, I get you, but the things he's saying aren't the stuff he's saying and the way he's approaching it isn't the way an ENFP would do that. So in other words, ENFPs would be wrong about different stuff and insistent about different stuff, in my opinion. I think there's something nice of being fat and accepting it. Some people will come at you and eat some potatoes, optionally. in front of them, or do sports, everyone to choice, but don't base it on other people's, based on your goals. I mean, it's something I am absolutely livid about, have been forever. This idea that people get critiqued on their bodies. I don't like it. It offends me. And, everybody should be treated with respect and decency and not judged by irrelevant physicalities. If you're looking at a person to draw conclusions about them, in my opinion, you're using the wrong senses. Use these to draw conclusions about people, not these. This. Use this. You smell bad. You're evil. Well, Poppy Stills, he's not a typing expert. He's an expert at converting ideas that reference typology into money. But yes, body language counts. But I guess that depends on what sort of things you're trying to determine about a person. If I had better FE, I would also want to look and glean information from my eyes. But my FE is not super great. And so the way I sort of manage my data flows is I try to glean all the FE information I need from tone. Audio information can give you a lot of the same sort of information that body language can, because tone's very revelatory and a subtle thing. Do I think that Jesus was to Judaism as C.S. Joseph is to typology? No. No, I don't. I think C.S. Joseph is as Judas, Judas didn't think to himself all along, hey, I'm going to betray Jesus. That was never his plan. His plan was to take advantage of the truths that were being spewed around him. But it didn't work out that way. I don't think C.S. Joseph is an ENTJ. I think he's an ESTJ. But it's not entirely impossible he could be an ENTJ. At least it would explain the countervalued extroverted intuition, the reason he always does things the same way. It would explain the ignoring TI. Judas was brought out. I actually don't know the story of Judas. I don't know what the details are. So if you want to explain it to me, you're welcome to. But my feeling about that story is that somehow Judas was weak rather than malevolent. But I could be wrong. Well, his typing grid isn't a typing grid, right? It's an interaction style thing. The claim that he makes that interaction styles link definitively to type is simply not justified by anything. He doesn't make justifications as to why this is the case. He doesn't make any justifications as to why we should believe it empirically, even if it doesn't have a logic behind it. It's just arbitrary. C.S. Joseph would never collab with me. There's zero chance C.S. Joseph would collab with me, because to collab with me, if you were C.S. Joseph, would suggest that he cares about the truth. He cares about being correct. He wants to defend his position. Somebody's disagreeing with him. He wants to defend his position. That's what I would do. I would want to defend my position. Grooming Zone. In YouTube, knowledge doesn't matter. Only subscribers matter. I mean, to whom? Matter to whom, right? It is the case that obviously for C.S. Joseph's subscribers, knowledge doesn't matter. Just the symbol of knowledge. Knowledge theater matters, right? You could call C.S. Joseph knowledge theater. No, I mean, C.S. Joseph would never collaborate with me anyway, Grooming Zone. It doesn't matter if I had 100,000 subscribers. He would never collaborate with me because he's not capable of collaborating. He would have to, basically take lessons from me. He doesn't know anything. It wouldn't be even a debate, right? It would just be me throwing him around the room with his wrongness. I don't even have to do hardly any work. Just ask a couple of questions, and the fact that he doesn't know anything is immediately revealed. He typed me as ESTP because I said the word cheese. That's basically his justification for it. I mean, he's not even trying. He types people as all kinds of crazy nonsense. He has no concept of what extroverted intuition is. That's for sure. Like, his explanation of why he's extroverted intuition, he makes that joke. That's not extroverted intuition. That's making me cringe. I mean, C.S. Joseph you say he has bookish knowledge, but you're wrong, Grooming Zone, because look, if C.S. Joseph had book knowledge, then you could ask him to articulate the position the book makes that he agrees with. He can't do that. He just thinks that having read a book affords him a symbol of competency because he can refer to the book regardless of whether he can articulate anything it says. Well, third slot extroverted intuition is extroverted intuition that's directed on a very practical plane. My dad's extroverted intuition in the third slot boils down to he likes to talk and have other people listen. When other people comment on what he's saying, he ignores them. He gives them space to comment, ignores what they said, and continues on with what he's saying. That's what my dad does. I sit there, we have dinner with him, and it's like last night we sat there and he pontificated about his various things that he wants to talk about. And Rachel and I politely listen, and occasionally I chime something in just because I got FE, and he doesn't care. He just ignores it and goes on. So yeah, that's consistent with third slot extroverted intuition. It's very non-intuitive. My dad's extroverted intuition is such that he thinks of places he'd like to go, things he'd like to do, and then he talks about World War II and other things like that. And I like listening to my dad. My dad is interesting because my dad's not trying to explain philosophy to me. If he were, all I could do is just say, Dad, I know you have a PhD in philosophy, but you have no business talking about me with this. You don't know anything compared to me. Which is funny, right? This is proof that symbols of competency don't matter. My father has a PhD in philosophy. He's an ESTJ. He doesn't know shit about philosophy. He's wrong about everything. As far as I can tell, the only reason he got a PhD in philosophy was because he was an atheist and he wanted to learn more arguments against God. That's a good question, Arcel. How does one convince an ESTJ if they are wrong? How does one influence an ESTJ without being manipulative? I mean, it's extremely difficult to convince an ESTJ they're wrong if you don't have good TE reasons as to why they're wrong. I can convince my dad he's wrong about tech stuff. Like, I can convince him with a lot of effort that, no, Dad, this email you received from Norton warning you that one of your emails has been spotted somewhere on the dark web does not mean you need to change all your passwords. No, it's there. Norton is doing what Norton does. It's playing constant contact. Like, look, we're doing something for you. The thing you're paying for, you're getting something for it. That's all that Norton's doing. There's no actual threat here. It's just sort of keeping you scared so you keep buying their product. He believes COVID is a conspiracy, which is quite an intuitive thing to believe in conspiracy theories. I mean, if you believe that COVID's a conspiracy, then you've got weak NI, because it doesn't make any sense. Certain things it is likely that you've got overactive NI when you see things as conspiracies all the time. However, good NI will be wrong in overseeing conspiracies where conspiracies are reasonable to assume. Like, there are lots of indications that a conspiracy could be going on, and I will conclude that it's a conspiracy. If there aren't good reasons to conclude a conspiracy is going on, bad NI will conclude conspiracy. Like, my dad concluded when we had an identity theft last year, and we were having, it was a pretty robust attempt. They hijacked my dad's cell phone. They even hijacked our landline to some extent. Like, it wasn't working properly. They had access to my dad's computer, like remotely, like remote desktop kind of stuff. But here's the thing. So we were busily doing all that, and in order to be careful, he had to make a phone call. He went to use the phone across the street at the neighbor's house. Now, when he went to use the phone across the street at the neighbor's house, it just so happened that when he picked up the phone, it wasn't working right. Like, you couldn't get a dial tone, and then finally did. And he concluded that the people who had done an identity theft on him had hijacked the neighbor's phone across the street. Now, that is unipolar. It doesn't matter how much evidence you have that you are under an identity theft attack. It doesn't make any sense that these people would be able to hijack the landline to the neighbors across the street in anticipation of you going across the street to use it. So yeah, that's the case about that. So it's weak NI to think that the COVID thing's a conspiracy, because it obviously isn't. There are way too many different responses to it by people with authority in different spots, and it's a haphazard mess, Upton Plate says, did C.S. Joseph say he got that surgery? No, I'm just telling you what Kimberly told me, because she had a friend who had that surgery, and she recognized very, very, a lot of strong similarities between the two and how they acted and stuff. And I guess she said he had that look or something. So I don't know if that's true or not. Okay. I'm just relating to you what Kimberly told me. Based on her experience, she concluded that was the case. No, you're not unipolar, Ron Moore. You don't really believe it's a conspiracy, I don't think. To understand what it means to say it's a conspiracy is that the way things are now is a result of a plan of some sort. Well, that's not the case. I am an extrovert. Grooming zone, I'm an ENTP. I'm observing you for the past 3 to 4 days. You were an SI-DOM. You think I'm an SI-DOM? I mean, if you want to think that, go for it. If I'm an SI-DOM, what does someone with a lot of extroverted intuition look like? So, since I'm an SI-DOM, I've made hundreds of different songs and uploaded them to YouTube. So if I were an ENTP, then I would make thousands in the same amount of time. Is that what you're saying? Chris, the realtor, 651. Ebert, my dad thought the shortage of masks at the beginning was a conspiracy and that the government thought their lives were more important. Now that masks are required, he will not wear his slave mask. Aha. Yeah. It's like being able to ignore what you said before is an NI thing, NI polar. Like, my dad will say something and I have had to learn, don't retain that. He's not retaining it. So, like, he and I had a little spat about a week and a half ago. And I'm still thinking about the stuff he said. He's not. He didn't mean, like, he indicates you should meow and you should meow or whatever. But if I were to bring it up now, like if I were to say, well, I've done meow and meow, then he'd look at me like, why are you telling me? C.S. Joseph has increased this morning's viewership and only drawn 2 dislikes. Not bad for a Monday morning. Would you all please take a quick second to push the C.S. Joseph, like button? No offense, but maximum of people will think the same. I mean, maximum of people? You mean the majority of people will think I'm an SI-DOM? I mean, that's possible. If a majority of people think I'm an SI-DOM, then the majority of people misunderstand cognitive function. I mean, certainly, Grooming Zone, you've not given me any reasons to believe I'm an SI-DOM. And this is the sort of issue that is determined by reasoning, not feelings, not gut instinct, reasoning. I have very little social battery after exposure to people I need to escape so I can daydream and process conversations and then continue later on. This isn't convenient for other people, though. Well, you probably want to keep the number of total people you're engaged with in your life on the smaller side then. I mean, the bottom line is if the problem with saying I'm anything other than an ENTP is you have to then answer the question, okay, well, show me an ENTP then. And show me how that ENTP is more extrovertedly intuitive, more introverted thinking than Eric. And it's impossible because if to be an ENTP, you had to be dramatically more intuitively active, ideational, and logical than me, then nobody could ever be an ENTP. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and that's the problem that people have when they're wrong about typology. C.S. Joseph is insisting he's an ENTP. What is the challenge he's going to face as a consequence? The problem for him is that I'm around, and I'm an actual ENTP, and it's pretty obvious to anybody who knows anything about cognitive functions that I represent extroverted intuition and introverted thinking. To the extent that C.S. Joseph deviates from my approach, then we need to explain why he's as another ENTP, he looks so different than me. If you're gonna say, well, let's assume one of those two is an ENTP, the only one anybody could reasonably assume is an ENTP is me, because he's simply not very ideational. He doesn't claim to have made up any of his ideas. He claims to have gotten them all from other places. Enrique recalled a memory 5 minutes ago. What an absolute SI-DOM. Memories don't exist without SI-DOMs. I don't even remember the memory I recalled either. Eric, I feel an ENTP growing up around these times that this technology could go insane with the overload. We are SI users. So at the end of the day, I retreat to my personal experience in the moment, physical experiences in the moment, such as the comfort of sleeping, the comfort of a bath, eating food. And the way you see things with all details possible is SI thing, whereas NI will see the bigger picture. I am an SI user. My knowledge function is SI. That's true. You are correct that I do not use a universalist understanding of knowledge. I use a particularist understanding of knowledge. For example, when I say, here's an insight I have about INFJs. What really happened is I noticed Rachel do something. I extrapolated out from that. My personal experience is representative of a larger truth. Then I checked to see if that in fact validated. And if it did, then I positioned it to everybody as INFJs are like this. That makes me an SI user, not an NI user. However, being an SI user does not mean I'm an SI DOM. Does not mean I'm an SI tool function, or does not mean I'm an SI third. It does define the nature of my epistemology, but it does not tell you that I'm not an ENTP, because ENTPs are SI users. Any creates information. What type regurgitates? ESTJ. ESTJ does, ESFJ does, because they have SI tool, so they're always referring to stuff that they've gotten someplace else, and they've got any third, which means they get a great deal of satisfaction from telling it to people. Poppy still says, I moved away from MBTI and found astrology to be more psychological than I once thought, maybe because I'm INFJ. I mean, I have noted from Rachel many times the following weird phenomenon. If, Rachel finds it extremely worthwhile and revelatory for when I say something like, well, I think the reason that why you get along with Mia is because these qualities, these universal things. I think the reason why you get along well with Zandy is because it's an equivalent relationship to me and an INTP, and these are the qualities that make those two get along so well, or whatever. I'll give some explanation with cognitive function mechanics. And she will express and genuinely seem to feel that finally this thing makes sense to me. Why? Because even though it's a particular personal experience for her, she's SI8th. It's not conscious and it's not valued. So in order for her to feel like she understands something, she needs to understand it through a link to a universal truth, even if it's a totally particularist area. Is Eric a good person for me to be in a relationship with? What she should do, logically, sensibly, is look to her own experience and say, am I enjoying my time with Eric? Is Eric nice to me? Did he treat me well? What data do I have that's relevant that I should look at? It's all particularist. It's all about her experiences with me and what they reveal. But she feels comfortable most when she has an external explanation for it. The reason we're so compatible is because our biorhythm numbers match up so beautifully. It's because our astrology charts match up so beautifully. It's because our numerology things match up so beautifully, or something like that. Of course, is that a good explanation for why we should be together? No, it's a terrible explanation for why we should be together. The understanding why we should be together is going to require you to rely on your SI understanding of things, not your NI understanding of things, because being with me is a particular experience, not a universal one. I will read your reasoning. Grooming zone. You are detail-oriented. I mean, I'm not detail-oriented. Look. See? I'm totally not detail-oriented. Granted, if the details are TI details, that's to say, if I need to make a logical case, it wouldn't call it detail oriented. I'm correctness oriented, which is when you're using language, there's it includes an implicit metric, namely consistency. With language, it's impossible to both. Okay, anytime you make a statement, there's an implied "I believe" before it, and it's called this is part of the illocutionary frame. So, in other words, if you say, I have cheese, I don't have cheese, the reason it's contradictory is not because of the statement itself, really, but because there's an implicit I believe in front of it. And it can't be true that you believe two contradictory things concurrently. So, that's worth noting. You always talk about concrete facts. So, what do you think is a concrete fact? This is interesting because, of course, I'm not talking about concrete things right now. I'm talking about extremely abstract things. And I'm explaining human behavior through this attentional manner model that's very robust and explanatory and gives us a lot of power to communicate. But if you think these are concrete facts, okay, well, what will qualify as an abstract notion then? Your Huckleberry says, you seem extremely detail-oriented to me, but I think that about most people. And I find that very gratifying to hear from both of you, actually, because I've put a lot of energy into trying to be attentive to details, especially in making music. If you were to say I'm extremely detail-oriented and you're talking about music, making music, you are right. Through years and years and years of struggle, have I gotten to the point where I recognize that I can't be sloppy and have it come out good, that it's extraordinarily labor intensive. But of course, in order to make music, I have to take amphetamines. I don't really work on music when I'm not on amphetamines because it's too detail oriented. Oh, I mean, I'm not wasting my time. I love it when people come in and argue their positions, no matter how ill intended they are. So if they're intended to come in here and just negate me and what I'm saying, as long as they're making points, that's fine, because it'll always work in my favor. Ruben Zone will make his argument, I'll respond to it, and everyone will be increasingly certain of what I'm saying and increasingly certain that he's wrong the longer we engage. Because actually, I am right. I do have good reasons for things. I am winning the debate. And the reason is because I'm siding with truth, not with wrongness. What type would be best for video editing? I would guess INTJ, because video editing requires good NI to know that, like, my NI works like this. I do way too much, and then I cut. An NI user will not have to do that. They'll start with the NI. I see people's cognitive functions more clearly when I watch them trying to learn languages. Well, that's an interesting notion, hot rats. I will say this, as an ENTP, when I've tried to learn languages in the past, particularly Spanish, I did take French in high school, but really I'm just talking about Spanish. When I tried to learn Spanish after high school at a college class, in my teaching credential program that I took Spanish, I had a very clear understanding of how I wanted it to be taught to me. And the way I wanted it to be taught was I wanted them to explain the grammar first, all the grammar first. That way I know how grammatically to construct any sentence I might want to say. So if I want to say, by the time this live stream is over, I will have drunk 2 cups of coffee. You will not learn how to say that sentence in Spanish until Spanish 4 or something, probably. Because, why? It has future perfect conditional in it. Not conditional. Future perfect. I will have drunk. It's future perfect, intensive form. Active voice. Active voice, future perfect, intensive form. That's what that is. Active voice, future perfect, intensive form. So if I want to say that in Spanish, I'm not going to know how to say that unless they teach me the grammar first. So I'd like a Spanish class to be taught like this. Here's a verb sheet that shows you all the tenses in Spanish. Here's how you construct present. Here's how you construct past. Here's how you construct future. Here's how you construct past perfect, present perfect. Here's how you construct past perfect. Here's how you construct future perfect. Here's how you construct them in the progressive forms. Then I can go in and fill in the vocabulary afterwards. And at least I'll be able to say what I want. The frustration I have with languages is that learning a language is not designed to empower you to communicate as you wish. It's designed to allow you to get by until you get really good at it. I don't like the way CS types people from interviews online. People put on personas when on TV. Well, that's true, but I mean, I accept the fact that if that's what people want to watch and they want to hear him tell them what type of celebrity is, that he's going to have to type the celebrity from the data he has. He's not going to be able to call the celebrity and talk to them. So he's even if he were right about cognitive functions, he'd be 70% at best in those typings, because that's as good as you can be given the situation. I don't hold that against him. No doubt you have a deep knowledge of the way you scrutinize other views because you already have storehouse of information which you highly believe and because you know it's tested by you. You got to remember, Grooming Zone, a couple of things. I am a debate coach, and I do have a big storehouse of information about abstract ideas. And the reason for this is because ENTPs and ENFPs are actually the very best types at using introverted sensing as it's not designed to be used. So introverted sensing is supposed to collect high resolution impressions of your own experiences, and an SI Dom will use those experiences to predict what's going to happen in the future. Our chicken got attacked by a dog. I dated an ISFJ before Rachel, and we had chickens, and our chicken got attacked by a dog because the dog came through a loose board in the fence from the neighbor's yard. I nailed back the board down, all the boards, make sure it couldn't come through. But as an SI Dom, Kimberly was obsessed with the idea that the chickens were now at risk from dogs. Why? Well, she'd experienced the chicken being attacked by a dog. So she insisted that we always keep the gates closed so that dogs don't walk in from the street. That's not where the dog came from. It doesn't make any sense, but that's SI. That's SI as it's supposed to be used, to trust your experiences rather than your reasoning. But if you're an NE Dom like me, you use SI to collect tidbits of ideas from all different places. You don't remember where you were when you learned the idea. You don't remember who the author is, who presented the idea. You just remember the argument, especially if you're a professional debate coach like me. And that means using SI as it's not intended to be used. I have a massive collection of abstract notions. It's true. Because I'm 49 years old and a professional debate coach who's accumulated a lot of ideas. Every ENTP at my age will have accumulated a lot of ideas. Why? Because, again, we're using SI not as it was intended to be used, but instead as an intuitive uses it, especially a thinking intuitive, namely collecting abstract ideas, keeping the ideas and the argumentation vectors that are correct, and discarding the rest. Just from a presentation standpoint, CS Joseph's whiteboard and intricate list seems very SE or NI. I would say it seems very TE, but okay. I couldn't learn another language to save my life. I got pretty good at Spanish for a while, and I quit looking at it and lost it. He does have a few more ESTP attributes than ENTP. Me or CS Joseph? If you want to say I have a few more ESTP attributes than ENTP, then you don't understand ESTPs and ENTPs very well. If you say that about CS Joseph, well, I guess ESTP is a less bad mistyping than ENTP for him. It was one of many points how the two types manifest, but they really seem to be struggling with being able to do a function versus preferring a function. I want to see what comes before that. Here's the first half of that. I feel like I wouldn't really jump to ENTP from ESTP on the basis of being empathetic. Although I probably could see a slight difference with NE rather than SE, but still. Is TE good for acquiring languages? Probably. I'm not sure. Host Eric's presentation is NE. These are my thoughts. Take them and deal with it. I've thought it through. Not just take it and deal with it. Challenge me. Go ahead. Challenge me on anything. I'll respond to it all. I will respond on point. What will C.S. Joseph never, ever, 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 ever do? Respond on point. It's exactly the same. Instead of learning vocab, I've studied how to structure sentences first, learn vocab second, and then work on pronunciation. I agree with you. That's exactly the right order of operations there. And the thing about learning vocab second is if you have the grammar down, then you can learn vocab as you need to. So as you desire to express a certain thing, then you can pick up the vocabulary for that. I've recently watched a video that you're referencing. I'm not referencing any particular video. Is it possible to type someone in a conversation with them if their brains shut off when they talk to people they don't really know? I mean, if they're willing to engage with you, if they're responsive, if they answer your questions, then it's possible to type somebody. F me, I agree with this SI explanation. Yo, nice. That's interesting about using SI, Eric, as it isn't supposed to be used. Well, I feel that. This is a new notion I had just a couple of days ago that that for every type is the best at using their fourth slot function as it's not supposed to be used. For Rachel, she uses SE to get away from introverted intuition rather than to execute it. Like if you're using SE and NI correctly in conjunction with each other, your NI gives you the path and your SE executes it. But for an INFJ, they use SE as it's not supposed to be used. Instead of to do things, they use it to stop being them for a little while so they can relax, get out of their head, because INFJs are really, you think ENTPs are very cerebral types, but I am so extroverted that I'm not really that stuck in my head usually. Usually I'm not just musing about things, I'm speaking them out loud. Because I feel like I do the same gathering in info and not remembering the details since just putting it into a general direction. That sounds like NI. NI is a knowledge function. It's a receive function. NI is what you know conclusively about something without doing any deliberation about it. As far as the SI component, let's say remembering things you've read or keeping an arc. SI is resource management. For an ENTP, resources are abstract ideas, and we're managing our archiving of those ideas and engaged intellectually with those ideas. Extroverted intuition begins with either extroverted sensing or introverted sensing. I'm either seeing something in front of me in the field of vision that I'm responding to or making meaning about, or I am beginning with something that I already know and building off of that. You don't begin extrovertedly intuiting in a vacuum building off of nothing. That's not how action functions work. That might be how receive functions work. Introverted intuition receives conclusions, truths, or whatever without any effort, directionality, or anything like that. That's not the way extroverted intuition works. I try to argue that NI and SI are the same process with a different focus. I mean, they're both knowledge functions. They're both ways of knowing about the world. And an SI user will know from their experience, either because this person here is acting just like Judy did. And when Judy was acting like this, she was meowing. Or because this is Judy, I know where she's going with this, the same place she went before. Now, this was very challenging for me when I was with an ISFJ, because I do this weird thing. I don't know why exactly I do it. Oh, I do know why. It's to successfully manage communications. Let's say I begin a conversation like this. You know what I think about Christmas trees? And then that conversation ends up in a big fight with me and the ISFJ. I will then, some few days later, begin the same conversation in the same way. You know what I think about Christmas trees? And I expect my partner to go, what? Are you not going there again, right? And then I will undermine their expectations. And I'll go the opposite direction I went last time or something to show that, no, we are not going to let this topic be a source of fighting. ISFJ, however, wouldn't allow me to ever disrupt her expectations. I'd say, you know what I think about Christmas trees? And before giving me a chance to establish that I was going the opposite direction this time, she'd go, you always wanted to focus on Christmas trees. It's like, so that strategy didn't work well with an ISFJ because they know in advance that you're going to do the same thing you did last time, whether it's true or not. How does FI tool differ from leading FI? Well, here's another recent notion that I had, which is There are two ways you can experience harms associated with a cognitive function. Harms associated with too much of that function, harms associated with too little of that function, okay? So there are only two places where a function can be where you won't experience harms from it. Slot 2 and slot 7, polar. And the reason is because of the following. In slot 2, you're extremely deft with it, but it's instrumental. It's not an absolute value. So you're happy to put it away when it's appropriate to put it away. And in the 7th, you don't experience any harms from it because you're so blind to that modality that you don't even recognize the failings in that modality as harms or meaningful in any sense. It's like watching that movie the other day, Before Sunrise, which is an extremely FI movie, was eye-opening to me. It's like, oh my God, how much of life's information am I completely oblivious to? It's like that. This thing that's happening here between these two people in this movie, this extremely deep, rich, complex, subtextual communication relationship thing is important and significant. And I'm missing out on all of it. I don't know what it means to be in love, really. I don't know what it means to feel a lot of strong feelings that need to be parsed out and are complicated and stuff. What I'm always trying to do is make sure that the other person is feeling safe, secure, comfortable, and loved so that I don't have to worry about feelings. All right, so grooming zone. You are right that I can dominate any argument about MBTI. That doesn't mean I'm an ESTJ or an ESTP. It means I'm definitely not an ESTJ or an ESTP. I'm an ENTP. The only person who could possibly dominate all discussion about MBTI would be somebody who's very ideationally robust and very TI strong. That's ENTP or INTP. INTP could also do it. Sean Ryan Barron, NI and SI, says Hodge Brew, are related in the sense that they approach the same task from opposing points. SI draw conclusions from past experience as NI conjectures conclusion from current experience. No, NI seeks the universal rule of which this experience is an example. But it doesn't seek it at all. It just receives it. Remember, that's the thing. The knowledge functions don't require effort. When I say, where did I sleep last night? In here or in the house? I don't have to think about it. I know. When, if I were to say, what kind of song does it sound like? You'd say jazz. That's an NI thing, right? You have no experience with that song. It's not any actual song. It just has that pointlessness that jazz has, you know? Eric, tell me some psychopathic traits FI-polars should not run away from, cultivate. Psychopathic or pathic? I don't think that one should ever embrace or cultivate psychopathy or sociopathy, because in both those instances, you're saying, I'm going to use others as a means to an end and prioritize my interests even at the expense of theirs. And that's wicked. Salem Black says, I don't know. The more you talk today, Eric, the more I'm sure you're ISTJ or I'm ENTP. Salem Black, I have never heard a single explanation for something from you that is compelling. So I don't know what data sets you're looking at, but if you think that we're very much alike today in what I'm saying, I've never heard you say anything like any of the things I'm saying, ever. Raphael said, you said Rachel equals girlfriend equals you love her, but that could change, right? But from your explanation, just if she's somehow not your girlfriend anymore, but you don't decide that then because you love her. I don't know. It's like this. I get in a relationship and then I love the other person as best I can as I understand it, which means to behave towards them in a loving fashion, affirmingly, not critically, and generally embrace their being, right? That's an approach towards life that says, I understand that this person in this role in the relationship is the person that you love. So I'm going to do what love is as far as I understand it, which is a bunch of behavioral things, really, how you treat the other person. Now, if, however, it turned out that this relationship didn't work and we ended up breaking up, either because she was like damaged like Kimberly and I just couldn't sustain it any longer, or because she got sick of me, or just she found somebody better or whatever. If we were to break up, I would get over it very quickly. I wouldn't be moping and sorrowful for a long time. That doesn't speak ill of Rachel. That doesn't mean that Rachel's not dramatically better for me than any previous partner. That's absolutely the case. It doesn't mean I don't love Rachel. I absolutely do. It means that I'm FI polar. And I don't see the point in exploring the depth of my feelings towards something. It seems a waste of time to me. It's too confusing anyway. I can't draw any conclusions about it. Whenever I try to talk about my understanding of FI, I tend to bog down and try to explain things and feel like, I don't know. You know, it's like, wait, is FI polar associated with dark triad traits? I actually don't think it is at all. I don't think ESTPs and ENTPs are likely to be sociopaths or psychopaths at all. I think that the types that are most likely to be psychopaths or sociopaths are third or fourth slot FI. Because in that case, it's sort of controlling their frame, but it's not constraining their behavior. Well, look, I've got a lot of stuff available for people to look at. I will give you right now the Typology quick reference guide that I made. I'll put a link for everybody on that. And it is a very, I like to think it's a useful quick reference guide. Just got to find it. Oh, this debate stuff in front of it now in Google Docs. Here it is. Typology quick reference guide. So one reason you can, one thing you can point to as a difference between me and C.S. Joseph is I have so many things that I have written and I ideationalized about it. You know, SI Doms can only offer support to people like you do, sacrificing your own need. I'm not sacrificing my need at all. I'm totally selfish. I love it when somebody like Grooming Zone comes in, determined to make their point, not determined to decide what's correct, but determined to push their point that's incorrect. Because invariably, it helps me articulate to everybody the truth. I can respond to it and say, okay, well, here's where you're wrong. Grooming Zone thinks I'm an extremely selfish person, sacrificing my own need to share my knowledge with others. Did anybody else think that? Does anybody else think I'm selfless? That's crazy. I mean, I'm not sacrificing my own need at all. I'm constantly indulging in what I feel like doing. That's why I'm live streaming right now rather than making a formal video or something. You know? Yeah, I know. Poor Grooming Zone hasn't gotten anything right so far. Every bit of analysis has fallen directly into the trash can. I'm definitely selfish. I'm indisputably selfish. But that's okay. You know, it's like I'm selfish, but I'm determined to have myself be defensible, which means I'm not going to be selfish in ways that I won't let other people be selfish in. So I'm not going to be subject to the critique, you are a hypocrite, Eric. If I say, I'm not going to then I'm going to apply the same rule to you. Reciprocal burdens. The rules apply to everybody the same way. Yeah, I agree. The thing is about that, Sky Gear, what I need to link to is a single document that combines the many partial documents I have on many different subjects in a way that tells an NI story that is complete and convincing. That's not quite done yet. I'm like, another thing I'm currently working on, I've got millions of half-finished projects, of course, because I'm an ENTP. SI DOMs tend to finish their projects before moving on to another one. But I do have this book that I'm working on that I'll eventually put that quick reference guide into this book. But this is called, this is designed specifically to be attentive to the fact that most people don't want information presented to them in a very TI way. People like a lot more NI and FE in their meow. So, well, Zaylen Black, as I've told you before, ISTJs are certainly likely to finish your projects, but I think you're an ISFJ, as I've told you before. But you be whatever you want. I don't give a fuck. Most critiques accusing one of being selfish are to get you to be more competent into their worldview. Seems like a fool's game. Everyone should be selfish to an extent, then think about others when your needs are met. I mean, my point about being selfish is selfishness is bad when it doesn't withstand scrutiny. If I don't have reciprocal burdens, if I insist on the right to be selfish in way X for myself and don't afford it to you, then it's a problem. Eric, who's your favorite ENTP? Well, my stock answer to that is Steve Allen. He's the ENTP I'd most like to be like. If I have anybody that I would like to emulate a little bit as a type model, it would be Steve Allen. I've wavered between the two. Yeah, I have wavered between the two. Salen, you're a challenging one to understand because, first of all, SI DOMs in general, it's difficult talking to them about their types because typology is an NI-TI thing. ISFJ, ISTJ, they both have adequate enough TI to handle the TI parts, but they both don't like NI. And so your experience of yourself as either getting a lot of projects done or leaving a lot of projects unfinished is going to be in your head compared against either some ideal for yourself that you have based on nothing, or compared against how you used to be, or compared against what? You're not comparing against a standard universal norm. So I don't know whether to trust your self-reporting or not. That's the thing. It's like that. It's the fish story. If you're a fish who considers himself really good at jumping out of the water and catching bugs in the air, then when asked questions about how well you do spending time in the air, you're going to answer in a way that the test says you must be a bird. Because from an SI DOM perspective, well, yeah, I really remember those times when I jumped up in the air. And I really remember doing well in those times. And those times stand out to me. So when asked questions, do you do well in the air? The answer is yes, even though I'm a fish. See what I'm saying? I thought perhaps she was crazy, but she was only highly intuitive. Carl Jung on the NI. That's fine. That's a nice thing. Then Black, everybody's welcome to come here and give me a hard time. They're welcome to push me as hard as they want on whatever points they want to push me on. And the good news is, because I'm not an SI DOM or SI tool function user, almost always, I will totally forget about this conversation by the time we next time have it. I've had so many times that people come to me and said, "Hey, dude, I know we're kind of like on the outs because of last time." Like, what? What are you talking about? I have no recollection of this supposed conflict we had. People do this to me all the time. They go, "Hey, regarding that conflict we're having," I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're here because of CS Joseph, so it works. And see, that's the thing. I decided this morning to title this video, "Does CS Joseph know he's not an ENTP?" I did that because I was inclined to get more people in the thing today. I don't know. I felt like a larger group. I know when I put that title or something like that, I'm going to get a larger group. Note how little that matters to me. Most of my titles have put no effort into successfully accumulating people here. Most of my titles are things like or how to make anyone love you instantly forever. It's just ridiculous, you know. Or I have titles like is the manimal within designed to do carpentry? It's like, it seems funny to me at the time, so I put it there, the title. That's not a way to title videos if you're caring about outcomes at all. This one is. This title is definitely a title to put up if you're caring about outcomes. This morning, I kind of cared about outcomes. The problem is, if I were really TE, I'd take this approach consistently. I'd try to consistently do things that would succeed rather than indulge my whim. Jorge Serial says clickbait. If this were clickbait, Jorge Serial, I would have to not be answering the question I asked. And I have been answering the question. Of course, my answer today is actually no, I don't think CS Joseph knows he's not an ENTP. And my justification for it is specifically that he's probably NI polar and TI ignoring. So if your attentional manners are habituated towards avoiding those metrics that would reveal your own falseness to you, then chances are he's tragic, not wicked. I mean, for me, 44 is a lot. 50, I got over 50 today. I haven't gotten over 50 in a long time. Why? Is it because normally I'm more boring than this? No. I'm totally hit and miss. Depends on my mood and everything. This is a typical style of live stream for me, not unusual in any fashion. So why are there more people here? Because the title. So why don't I title things like that more often? Because I countervalue TE and I don't give a fuck. I'm an ENTP. I think I'm an ENTP, says Chris the Realtor 615. Ebert, as a check on this, can I ask you a question? Yes. Do you order the same meal at a restaurant when you go, or do you prefer to order differently every time? I mostly order the same thing. So Rachel and I mostly get McDonald's to eat when we go out to eat. We'll go through McDonald's and we'll get 4 McDoubles, a large fries, and 2 Cokes. Now, if I go to like what's that place called? Not Jimmy John's, but the other sandwich place, like Jersey Mike's. When I go to Jersey Mike's, I always get the same thing too. I get a giant roast beef sandwich thing. But the reason this is like TE about SI stuff. For me, food and Rachel both, food is something you have to consume because you need calories. And it's not something that is it's like, I don't really like eating. I wish I didn't have to eat. When I do have to eat, I just want to shove it down my face as fast as possible so I don't have to think about eating anymore. Whenever I explain something, I want to hold up a whiteboard and draw illustrations and diagrams while talking about it. TE things, not necessarily. If you're explaining things that are well conveyed visually, then to want to use some visual representation of it is normal for any type. Like when I'm teaching a class, I have a whiteboard and I'm writing on the whiteboard all the time. I'm drawing little pictures and stuff like that. But I don't have a whiteboard here. And also, I'm not lecturing. I'm engaging with people. There's a big difference. See, C.S. Joseph is using a whiteboard all the time because he's lecturing. He's not engaging in a conversation with people in which he is an equal partner. I'm an equal partner in this conversation because I'm responding to what you say. And if you're attentive, clever, and correct, you can get me. And I'll have to be like, you're right, my bad, I'm wrong. C.S. Joseph, you do not have that possibility. You cannot get him. He will not allow you to hold his words to account. He will not allow you to scrutinize with him what he's saying. Big difference between the two of us, you know? And the most important reason why you should prefer me is that I am actually able, willing, and eager to address your concerns, complaints, and questions, to take seriously your arguments and respond on point. If somebody's trying to explain something to you and they won't do that, then they don't understand it very well. That's why you touch your body to make sure it hasn't disappeared. There it is. Okay. Whew. I thought I might have left my penis inside. It's here. It's good. We're fine. I feel like both are true. : / AJFH, DJ, SJ, SJ, and it applies to a number of other things, but that's the one I thought of first. It's an artery clogger. What's an artery clogger? Articlog? Are your arteries moving blood through your veins too freely? Try Articlog today. Thank you for the check. Affirming my thoughts. Today I ordered my breakfast burrito, just enough to sustain the body, not a passion by any means. I was concerned that consistency negated the NE. No. SI DOMs are a lot more likely to care about their food. Now, they may have things they habitually eat, but for an SI DOM, when they go to a restaurant, it's a set of data in that menu that they have a clear understanding of their relationship with it. They know, I don't really like green onions. So they'll be looking at the things. I'm just like, just no fish, no mayonnaise. I'll eat it. It's fine. Jade. Okay. No, Jade, you got to be kidding me. He holds himself accountable. He responds to his viewers all the time. Jade, avoiding his viewers' questions by referring them to some book is not responsive. He does not address legitimate concerns about his reasoning. He doesn't provide adequate reasoning to articulate specific concerns about even. You have got to be kidding me when you say he's being accountable. If he were accountable, he'd have a debate with me. I've asked him plenty of times. I've encouraged him plenty of times. But he's not being accountable. He's being efficacy minded. He's thinking about what's best for him, not what helps us to determine the truth. Big difference. So, Jade, it's fine to take a side or whatever, but be honest in what you're saying. See, like this is what I'm talking about, Zaylen Black. I just don't know what to make about your self-reporting at all. It's hard for me to gauge. You have a tendency to want to note and point out things that you know about yourself that are contradictory to definitiveness about type. I would say that's consistent with an SI DOM. Right. Censors love C.S. Joseph because he will tell them they are intuitive. Right. And that intuitives are censors. Oh, no. Don't worry about it. You're not one of the boring types. Eric is. All right. Here's his strategy. Find the most intuitive person you can possibly imagine and call him an ESTP. What would it be like if ENTP versus ENTP have a debate? You could look at the debate between me and Jack from Socionics. Incredibly frustrating because Jack knew he didn't have an affirmation. In other words, he didn't have clear positions he could articulate and win on. So all he did was try to dissemble, which is to say, to mush out anything I was saying so that it was less definitive. It was extraordinarily frustrating. I mean, if anybody were to say, well, who won the debate? Well, I mean, obviously I did by any reasonable metric, in the sense that he was on defense the whole time and I was on offense the whole time. But the truth is, everybody lost because he wasn't engaged in dialectic. He was engaged in rhetoric. Most ENTPs are not going to engage in dialectic until they're older. If then. I, of course, have an advantage. I was a debater in high school, and I've been a debate coach as a profession. And so that forces you to be honest. I can pretend this argument is going to win the round, but I can lie to myself and say, this is a good argument, I'm going to win the round with it. Proof's in the pudding. My kids would go out and get their ass kicked. I have to be honest and say, what's actually the most effective argument here, regardless of my position on it. You tell your thinking out loud. You are never scattered like NI. You are to the point. The info you give out. Well, thanks, Grooming Zone. Wow. Grooming Zone is of the opinion that I'm not scattered, that I've got great NI, that the truths I speak are determinate, clear, concise. Well, I am kind of killing it today. I agree. But have you ever met a NI Dom? Or even, it's like, Grooming Zone, you gotta really think a little bit about what the type you think okay, let me reset. Grooming Zone, the reason I sound like this is clear, concise, prepared, definitive is because I'm extremely good at thinking out loud in ways that are communicatively effective. So for me, thinking on the fly, thinking out loud sounds more prepared and precise and correct than you expressing something you've thought through for months. My NI is ignored as fuck. That doesn't mean that I'm incapable of recognizing when things are true or not. It means that in my own life, I am very unlikely to apply an NI reality, even when I obviously should. And the reason is because I'm too busy potentiating out other possibilities. So, for example, Rachel and I were fishing one time, and it was a terrible spot I had picked to fish. Rachel kept putting the line into the tree above, because there's a tree over us, right? She said, we should move to different spots. I was like, no, look, we can, if we go this way and we try this thing, and we can avoid this problem. And then after a few more minutes, I was like, wait, hold on a second. Forget what I just said. You were obviously right. We should move. I don't know why I'm being so stupid. My bad. Well, I do know why I'm being so stupid. And I'm ignoring. I'm determined to have my NE produce some other conclusion than what my NI is telling me. All right, this is Snoop Dogg OG. And I'm going to admit, I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, that the actual Snoop Dogg grew it. I think it's just named after him. But it's called Snoop Dogg OG, and it's one of the weeds at Weed Mart that Rachel and I both enjoy quite a bit when they've got a decent batch of it, you know. If you're gonna say, here's a bag of premium version of Meow, what would the Meow be for me? It would be Gorilla Glue number 4. Well, grooming zone. By what metric did you use to conclude that you were right ultimately? So this will be revelatory about you in general, grooming zone, which is what metric did you use after you say you predicted your friends after observing them for a few days carefully, and then eventually you determined you were right. What metric did you use between that first thing and determining you were right? To determine you were right. Answer that question, and it'll be extremely revelatory about what type you are, how you think, etc. So Ethan McDonald said at least C.S. Joseph typed M&M right. What this reveals is that Ethan McDonald and C.S. Joseph both have no fucking idea what extroverted intuition is. Now, I will say this, though. ISTP is a good typing for M&M if you just watch interviews of him and know nothing about his work product. Are you like Platinum OG and Skywalker? I like Skywalker a lot too. Skywalker OG or Skywalker or White Skywalker, there's a couple of variations of it we search around here, is one of my favorites. It definitely is. It's like, there's some kind of weeds that are very white and some kind of weeds that are very red, like the hairs on them. Skywalker is one of the whitest weeds that there is. It's super white crystally. And I like those. I tend to like those kinds of weeds best. But I will say that Gorilla Glue number 4 doesn't quite qualify as one of those kind of weeds. The reason I like Gorilla Glue number 4 best is because it's the most unique weed I've ever smoked. It's more unlike any other weed than any other weed. Right. What Sky Gear says is correct. If you claim Eminem is an ISTP, then you also need to claim he doesn't write his own songs. If that's the case, then fine. How does TI and smoking work together? They're not related at all. TI is a way of understanding whether something is communicably defensible and how it's communicably defensible. It's a way of understanding what's the most defensible position given agreement about meow, 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 meow. Smoking is a SI-FI thing. It's a real-time experience thing. TI is not about real-time experience. It's about statuses. So here's the thing. I asked quite some time ago. I asked, what's his name? Groomy Zone. I asked him to explain why, what his reasoning was so that we can validate it independently, which is an objective thing. He said, I predicted my friends after observing them for a few days carefully, and 99% of the time I was right about their types. So I naturally asked Grooming Zone, okay, what was the metric you used to conclude about your conclusion between predicting and deciding? And that will help us to understand him a lot and understand his type a lot. He has not answered that question yet. So, here he did finally. MBTI test results are the ultimate truth. Which MBTI test? When I find out their DOM function, it's somewhat easier for me to identify further on what function they are not using at all. So wait, you say you predict what type they are, then you get them to take a test, and the test confirms you were right. What test do you get them to take? Why do you think that test has is the definitive answer on the thing. What makes that test the best? Smoking makes you lazy, stupid, and unconcerned. That's TI. Smoking makes you lazy, stupid, and unconcerned. Smoking weed? I mean, it may make you lazy, stupid, and unconcerned. It certainly doesn't have that impact on me. I'm quite productive. Whether or not I'm always producing the most useful thing to produce is another question. But I'm much more productive than any non-pot smoker I know. Stupid. I've been smoking marijuana since I was 14 years old. I'm 49 years old now. So after 35 years of marijuana smoking, if in fact marijuana negatively impacted intelligence, then even in the most generous understanding of where I could have started from, I would still be a complete moron by now. And by any objective measure, no third party would make, any third party might say, Eric's not particularly smart. That's fine. But no honest third party would say Eric's a moron. Well, I mean, the thing is, the point is, Running Fox, I'm trying to make is, if he wants to have a definitive metric, fine. But tell us what that is. I would say MBTI test results. Which test? Which test is your definitive metric? Since you have your prediction and you have the truth and you've discovered that your prediction was true, what was the specific metric you used to establish the truth? Do you think that matters? Do you think that maybe that's determinant in this issue? It absolutely is. I see. So, grooming zone. Are you trying to tell me that when you meet people, you predict what type they are, and then you have them pay to take the Myers-Briggs test, or you pay for them, they all take it, and then you compare your prediction against that result? And second, why in the world would you think that Myers-Briggs has the most trustable results? Why? What possible reason? I mean, okay, well, here's one possible reason. Is this your reasoning? Is it because they've been around the longest? Is that why? What is your reasoning for why they're the most effective typologists? Okay, so, but why? But why do you think MBTI is more right than me, for example? Because MBTI will tell you that an ISFJ is a judger. I'll tell you an ISFJ is a perceiver. Because why? Because SI is a perceiving function. And they start with SI. I know you're not big into socionics, but do you think your understanding of the function definitions are closer to that of socionics and MBTI? I think they're closer to socionics in general. I've taken ideas from both places. Look, most of my understanding of cognitive functions is not of my own creation. Most of it is correct parts of other things that I've selected because they are correct. So when I read something, I'm being utterly fair to it. Harsh but fair, which means if there's something wrong with one of the statements, something that doesn't withstand scrutiny in an idea, I will dismiss it immediately. However, I am ultimately looking for things that are true, more true than what I already know. I'm looking for someone and something to prove me wrong about something so I can change my position and be right. There are two different kinds of people who come in and challenge me. There are those who challenge me to the effect of prompting from me a more robust explanation and defense, and thereby strengthening my position. Like grooming zone's one such example. But there are also people who come in here and keep me honest, like Skygear and Hambone or Horse Mumbler. If I say anything that's even slightly demonstrably wrong, the TI DOMs will jump at the opportunity to tell me. They love proving me wrong. The point is, I love being proved wrong too. The reason is I am aware that when you like being proved wrong, it happens less and less and less and less frequently. Because every time you're proved wrong, you jettison the wrong position, you replace it with the correct one. Before you know it, there's not a lot of wrong stuff to attack. Grooming zone, you didn't answer my question. You avoided my question. I asked you why you think MBTI is more reliable. You said it's highly acknowledged by most people, but that's certainly within the typology community, it's broadly thought to be a primitive, inaccurate version of things that only pays any attention to half of the functions. People outside of the typology community generally dismiss MBTI as pseudoscience. So you're wrong on both accounts. And most importantly, even if you were right, that's not a reason to prefer it, because cognitive functions require TI reasoning justifications, not FE reasoning justifications. And your justification that it's popular to believe something is not a reason to believe it. It's a good indication that it's something you should make a determination about. If everybody believes something, you need to actually go explore it, think about it, make a determination as to whether they're right or not, maybe. But it certainly isn't a reason to believe anything. Guys, Running Fox, that ball did not hit you in the face. It was going to, but then it redirected to Grooming Zone's face. Grooming Zone equals CS Joseph. I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. I don't think CS Joseph has enough native ability to care about the truth, to care about engaging with me about it. He doesn't care. He doesn't even care about winning the arguments, because he's able to structure his environment such that only those arguments he wants to see and wants to respond to get through. He's not honest enough to tackle the ones he doesn't want to deal with. What differences do you find with NITI understanding of typology and SITI understanding of it? Okay, well, so here's the thing. You've got those two things there. Those aren't right. It goes NIFI versus NITI, or NITI versus SITI is fine too. But ultimately, it's going to be about I see what, never mind. My bad. I see what you're saying. I was confused. So SI with TI is going to be, depends where it is in the stack, right? If I'm an INTP or an ENTP, then my relationship with the ideas is that they are objects on a flow. I can either attach a status of correct to them, attach status of incorrect. I can make them conditional. I can do all the things I can do with objects on the flow. If I'm an NI user, then with TI, then I understand that the statuses that I'm ultimately dealing with can't fully be validated with TI, but are best asserted with TI. So rather than understanding it as objects on the flow, they understand it as instances within a frame. It's a little bit differently. Now, that's a very abstract way of saying that NI-DOM, for example, will think that the experience is because of the universal. That's incorrect, but the native way of NI. It assumes that there's nothing new under the sun, that all particulars are examples of universals, and that universals explain why particulars are always. That's usually often not the case at all. If you're talking about your relationship, why do Rachel and I get along so well? Well, I can give you lots of different answers for that, but the answers are really experiential. It's because when I say meow, 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 and she smiles back at me, it makes me feel good. It's like stupid shit like that, right? It's not, there aren't any, why are Rachel and I good for each other? It's not because, well, I've got Gemini moon rising in my astro butthole with a secondary yod of whatever. Those things aren't reasons why Rachel and I are great together. But for an NI user, they seem like that's important. Like, I can't rely on my own personal experience to say we're good together because of my experiences. We're good together because of an explanation. That's the difference between SI and NI in general. But if you're talking about INTP, ENTP, we are using SI as it ought not be used. Namely, we are not using it to keep track of our experiences as a resource to understand things against. We're using it to keep track of little tidbits of ideas and other crap we find around the world. It's like when we go through the world, and ENTP goes through the world and reads a bunch of shit on the internet, I might spend 2 hours reading, and I'll remember very clearly 5 different things, 5 specific arguments that were worth remembering. And I probably won't remember much of anything else. So ENTPs, ironically, though they are SI fourth, display an incredible collection of remembered things. If you misunderstood SI, you might think that's indicative of them being an SI Dom. Having a lot of knowledge about something is not indicative of anything necessarily. It's in this case, it's really like how the knowledge manifests in relation to the ontology in general that is revelatory. Like the fact that my use of SI is specifically so heavily tilted towards the metaphysical, that I'm remembering arguments, things people say, and not what it smelled like, what I felt like, or other high resolution issues. Because an ENIDOM is dealing with the most low resolution things that SI can deal with, namely word representations of even a more basic thing like a warrant vector or something. I can keep track of a lot of them. I can keep track of a shit ton of them because the things I'm keeping track of are very small files. I'm not even keeping track of a low resolution version of the picture. I'm keeping track of a thumbnail with the name, Hawaii trip picture 4. You don't use TE to remember facts. No. TE is not a knowledge function. TE is an interface function. How does fourth FI play out? Well, your Huckleberry, by the way, I want to publish that other video with you. I'll do it right now. You are large in my thoughts. Let me just tell you that. My Huckleberry. Your Huckleberry. That's very confusing. Your Huckleberry. Is it my Huckleberry then? Are you saying it's mine? Or anyway. So yeah, you're avoiding the question. And what that tells us is knowing what kind of questions a person avoids or is unable to answer or unwilling to answer will be revelatory about how much weight we should put into their conclusions about certain kinds of things. So if Groomington's coming in and making a statement about the nature of SI DOMs and what introverted sensing is, then we should withhold judgment. Maybe he's right. We ask a couple questions, and then we're able to determine whether we should give him any attention at all, really. If he can't answer a couple basic questions like why you think that MBTI test is the definitive test. I mean, he did answer. He said, because it's popular, basically. So if, in fact, that's his reasoning, we can conclude that his conclusions about this matter are probably not ones we should pay much attention to, because this isn't a matter that's adjudicated with that attentional metric. If we were asking about, hey, did this person seem socially awkward? We would want to use the metric that Grooming Zone would use, which is, well, what do most people think? That's basically how we know whether FE is working or not. It's a knowledge thing. You can know that somebody's making you cringe without having to understand why at all. If I were an NI dominant, I would have processed the information I'm giving. Well, I'm not an NI dominant. I never claimed to be an NI dominant, and you haven't given me much information to process. I keep asking you for details, specifics, concrete answers that I can work with. I mean, not concrete, but expressed answers, not withheld, right? Vocalized or stated statements that you make. I'm looking for clear statements you make that actually engage intellectually about this. You're avoiding those. So that tells us how much weight to put into your opinions. I challenge you to give me a question I will refuse to answer. That's a great thing to say, by the way. Erg, schnurg. I challenge, it's like, that's basically my attitude. I challenge you to give me a question I refuse to answer or avoid. I mean, there might be some questions I say, I'm not going to answer that. I don't want to talk about that. If it were personal enough, it's possible. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I certainly wouldn't avoid it. I would give you a direct response, say, I don't want to answer this, and this is why. So NI assumes a truth based of subjective connections, even though there could be true concretely and experientially. Okay, experientially is the same thing as subjectively. Concretely links also to experientially and subjectively. Where an SI does not assume anything and extracts concrete experiential for reasons. No, it's as simple as this. My attention is backwards focusing and resource management focusing. That's SI. It says, to the extent that I need to know something, it's there somewhere in my data from the past. And NI, Dom, instead says, I understand the world in the following way, that my experience is just my experience, but that it often is an example of a universal rule in some sense. So I will go through life not keeping track of all of the experiences and stuff that I can then reference to see what's useful, but instead on the fly, trying to determine what's useful and remembering that. So people will, SI polar person, ENFJ, ENTJ will say, yeah, I frequently have an argument with my wife about that. We often talk about her phone etiquette, and I tell her I don't like that, and we have little spats about it. And I'll say, well, can you tell me the last time that occurred? No. Can you tell me about any specific instance of it? No. Well, why? How could that possibly be? Well, because they're SI polar. They don't retain any of the low resolution knowledge. They only retain the high resolution knowledge, basically. I mean, even polar is a little bit, but oh yeah, sorry, your Huckleberry. I got sidetracked and forgot what I was talking about. Your Huckleberry is looming large in my attentions lately because it's like I see in him somebody who is making a concerted effort to be positively impacted by metacognition, which is to say, if you understand if you spend attention towards thinking about how you're thinking and how other people are thinking and how thinking about thinking might impact your thinking, then you are, in my opinion, being consistent with the positive moral indications of the world, that you're doing what you ought to be doing, that nobody can be expected to be anything but their type. Your Huckleberry is an ENTJ, and his nature is to justify things in ways that I consider appalling. He's not wicked. He's an ENTJ. So it's important to me that we had those conversations the other day, regardless of how I responded or dealt with them in the moment. By the way, your Huckleberry, I've spent more time with that experience with my SI since, and the communication impacts me in a variety of ways that probably don't show immediately when you're having the conversation. I'm waiting for the day. The ERIC test is so genius that it will discard MBTI all over the world, and ERIC theories will be taught. I mean, I don't like concrete conclusions about anything other than my religious beliefs and not being a bully. Predictions are not inherently subjective. They aren't subjective or objective, really. Okay, predictions are a separate thing from statements. You can have predictive statements, you can have descriptive statements, normative statements, and descriptive statements. 4 kinds of statements. So we normally use words like objective and subjective to deal with normative, prescriptive, and descriptive statements, but not predictive. In other words, breaking a promise is different than lying. What would be the best way to be typed most accurately? Pay me $100 for a 1-hour face-to-face session, and you're going to end up with the most accurate typing you possibly can get anywhere. My personal belief about myself, it's a positive belief about myself that I assert as an affirmation. Now, as somebody who's a TI second person user, a TI tool user, my inclination is to always argue against myself, because that way I counteract any possible bias. So even so, given that fact, I am asserting hereby, right now, and have many times before, that I am the world's single best typologist, that I understand typology better than anybody else in the world, and that my understanding of it is by far the most correct. I make those assertions here. I will continue to make them forever. If you want me to substantiate those claims, well, that's what all of this stuff that I'm doing is substantiation of those claims. I understand well that for most people who hear me make those claims, they think, well, that can't possibly be the case. There are 7 billion people on this earth. How can this random guy with 6,000 subscribers on YouTube be the most correct and be correct for everybody else who's getting it wrong, and these things he's saying be correct and stuff like that? How could that possibly be? I ask myself the same question. I ask myself the same question all the time. But it is. It is the case. And it's like, how is it that I happen to stumble on this whole idea that is genius, brilliant idea that everybody's doing wrong and getting wrong, and be able to figure out myself the way that this is how they're getting it wrong and this is how to do it right? Destiny, God, luck, I don't know. Just how it is. Is it because I'm so much smarter than everybody else? No, I'm not so much smarter than everybody else. I am, however, so much more well-trained in what it means to make a real case that determines things. I'm, after all, a debate coach. I know what case making looks like. And that was the problem that everybody else has in coming into cognitive functions. They didn't know what case making looked like. In case making, you have to ask yourself first, what is this thing I'm making doing? Is it a proof? Is it a preponderance of the evidence thing? Is it a yeah? Is it a yeah? Well, after a number of false starts and a lot of thinking and a lot of work and a lot of years and scrapping a couple of models that didn't work out for myself, I realized that what we are doing is modeling information flows on fields as they interact with objects according to a grammar. In other words, we're talking about something that should be programmable. That's how you would test it. If we wanted to model some other system, like how ants interact with banana trees or something, we would assign quality, statuses, etc., to all the various objects, fields, agents, vectors, and stuff, and then model it and see if we got it right. That's how intelligent people address this issue. They begin with the question of, what am I trying to do? What is this case I'm making? What is this case I'm making trying to do? And how would we validate it? How do we validate other things that try to do what this is trying to do? What are equivalencies? How can we make this determinate rather than subjective? Well, if you're talking about clear modelable elements such as receive functions receiving information, action functions putting information, knowledge functions receiving information, action functions putting information, deliberation functions getting information, and interface functions handshaking information. then all of a sudden we've got the working basics of something that actually makes sense, right? Of course, you're still going to find, wait, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. Well, that's because there's actually 4 fields we have to address. There's obviously an external physical field where the objects are. There's an internal physical field, my own body. It's different. I can feel things here, and I can gain sensory information from things out here. In, out, different, inherently different. It is also the case that I can think things. I have an internal metaphysical field, or I can say them out loud and you can hear them. I have an external metaphysical field. What is the human manifestation of the external metaphysical field? The internet. Prior to the invention of the internet, we had no shared external metaphysical field, except talking to each other, writing books, stuff like that, libraries. There was no time immediacy to it, though. Yeah, Christopher 615 Ebert, thank you for pointing that out. Main issue most folks have is falsifiability. Typology in most incarnations can only be judged against itself, and even I will concede that I don't have enough definitive tests. Cognitive functions in general don't link specifically enough with skills across the board to allow me to have really conclusive tests to do more than say. I can pretty definitively narrow somebody down to 3 types or something, and it'd be essentially impossible to argue against that if you're arguing with any sense. But there were, until some more stuff happens and more something to make it a little bit more absolutist, there will always be some wiggle room. When I type somebody, yeah, people will be able to make arguments as to why I'm wrong, and they're not going to be, for a while yet, definitive empirics that will provide a flat rhetorical slope or a downhill slope. You see, grooming zone, there's something called rhetorical slope. So in some sense, you are right that the rhetorical slope for my claims of being more correct than MBTI is steeper than it could be. And part of the reason why it's steeper is because a lot of people, maybe even the majority, when they hear a statement like that, they're going to judge it based on a heuristic rather than a deliberative process. So if it sounds like a large claim by a person who's talking about something that's self-aggrandizing, makes themselves look good, it will be received with a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of people who are out there claiming they are right about typology. So if in fact I'm right, then all of them are wrong. What is the likelihood that I'd be the one person who's right and everybody else is wrong? And well, okay, so all those things are reasons why the rhetorical slope is steep. It makes it harder for me to convince people that I'm correct about this. That's true. I'm not undertaking a easy challenge here, trying to win hearts and minds that I am correct where all these more well-known people are wrong. The thing is, there's an inherent slowness to the acceptance of good ideas that are justified with intuition and reason. Part of the reason why there's an inherent resistance to it is because when I say ENFPs produce truths that are made out of intuition and reasons, which is FI for them, we shouldn't listen to them. They're wrong because they're talking about things for the general but they're using a particular function. However, when I do it, you should listen to me. Why? Well, not for any reasons related to me at all. Because people smarter than me, INTPs, I've already done your work for you. They're why I'm right. Every time I'm wrong, they correct me. It's not. I didn't intuit this correctly by and I just getting it all of a sudden. I did it the hard way, the stupid way, the brute force way, the NE way. I just threw out everything I could think of that I couldn't dismiss, and then let people smarter than me dismiss it, and then replace it with something better. I'm always looking to take advantage of everybody's intelligence, even people who I consider dumb or not very smart might say something that's smarter than what I believe, because it's not really the person who's smart or dumb, it's the words that are smart or dumb. I would like to have only smart words, but I'm human. I sometimes am wrong. I sometimes make mistakes. I rely on people smarter than me to point out those things so I can jettison them. Now, Grooming Zone, if you had shown up in year 1, at 6-month point, then you would have encountered me with a bunch of really roughshod and ideas that were worth disputing and that you probably get somewhere with. But a shit ton of people, a lot smarter than you, have already gone over my shit with a fine-tooth comb and corrected me on everything. I've gotten rid of those ideas because I'm not attached to my wrong ideas. And I've replaced them with the correct ideas. So now you're coming in and you find that here's something that's extremely well thought out. Somebody who's really quite convincing about it. And he makes a compelling case as to why, even if you don't want to deliberate about the ideas yourself, you still have to give serious consideration to the possibility that my ideas are correct. After all, there is no other typologist anywhere who is engaging so directly with everybody who disagrees with them. And so honestly. Now, I would point out, Grooming Zone, you're not dealing with me very honestly. But that's why I am qualified to, say, run for president, whereas probably you're not. I don't know who you are, but do you want to get swifty? What does getting swifty mean? Gunnar Erickson says he has the best words. Thank you, Sean Ryan Barron. I think he was talking to me, Gunnar, not you. What is getting swifty? I need to know what that is before anything else. Because I'm concerned I might not be swifty and need to be, or that I was swifty, ceased being, and need to resume swiftiness. I mean, Desert INTJ, it is absolutely true that I need a staff. I need people, staff. Oh, I have watched Rick and Morty, all of those episodes now, but every time I watch, I feel like they're stealing my jokes. Generally we are still talking about it. It's more like we're discussing the stuff that's stemmed from that initial conversation topic, which is like, well, what exactly comprises a good reason to affirm a given position or negate a given position? Why, if you have concluded, how have you gotten there? And should you have faith in your own conclusion about that? The most important issue here today, though, as far as I'm concerned, the most important question is the one that's in the title. Does CS Joseph know? Does he really know that he's not an ENTP? And I am positing today that the correct answer is no, he doesn't know, actually, because he's NI polar and TI ignoring. And so that makes it just tragic, not wicked. He's either evil or tragic, and I guess in some sense, a lot more. I've heard variants on that from a couple of different people, and I tend to agree with it. It's over the top fan base is annoying. And like Spacey told this story one time of he went to like a club and it was fun club. And then this guy walked in and he was like Rick and Morty from head to toe. He had like a hat, a shirt, pants, shoes. And it's just like, why do you have to ruin what I love? Thanks, Red Fox. Peace to you too. I think I'm gonna call it a live stream as well. Wow, it's 2:45. It's been quite a juicy one. I will say this before I go. sometimes when I'm doing live streams, most of my live streams, I have no interest in watching them afterwards, but I can tell sometimes when I'm on. I was watching the other day yesterday I was watching the if supporting masks makes you evil live stream. I was totally on in that one. If I'm on enough, it's entertaining for me to watch them afterwards. I suspect I've been on this whole time. This feels like a live stream I will watch afterwards, these parts of it. So thanks for being here, and have a great day, and I love you all.